Next up is the 1912 Center 5-year renewal agreement with Heart of the Arts and the City of Moscow. And Dwight Curtis and Jenny Sheneman are going to present.
All right, well, thank you and good afternoon. As you said, we are here to go through the 5-year renewal agreement for the 1912 Center management and operations for the center. And I've got just a brief PowerPoint, one slider here.
Favorite.
Yeah, and I mean, other than a few outlying issues, this pretty well sums it up, in my opinion. The present agreement expires on the 30th of September, and of course starts on the 1st of October if it's renewed. The present agreement was a 5-year renewal with a 20-year renewal option, and the new one is a 5-year renewal with a 5-year renewal option. The present existing agreement has a $60,000 annual management and operations line item, and you have the same thing for the proposed agreement. The annual utilities and janitorial line item for the present agreement is $35,000. That also included a BMI adjustment on an annual basis that Heart of the Arts never took advantage of, so it just remained at $35,000. And for the proposed adjustment, or the proposed agreement, we also have the $35,000. I have an error there. I believe that the BMI is not part of the that's my copy paste thing there. So the BMI adjustment is not on the renewal.
Just a straight 35.
Just straight 35. And that's for the duration of the agreement. Right now, the city takes care of all the landscaping. The new agreement would have Heart of the Arts taking care of all of that. In the present agreement, the city takes care of the parking lot snow removal, and in the new agreement, Heart of the Arts would take care of that. Before I turn this over to Jenny, I would just like to comment that my experience over the last 5 years working with Heart of the Arts has been excellent. I believe that the accomplishments that they have made over these years, the city would not have been able to do. We experienced that prior to bringing them on board. Raising the revenues and getting the facility renovated just wasn't in the cards. So I think overall, I think this is a good agreement. I think if the city is going to keep this building, that it's a smart agreement. We would have to pay most of this anyway. It just would be city staff instead of somebody else to take care of it. So with that, I will turn this over to Jenny and let her have it.
Hi. So I'm Jenny Sheneman, and I'm the Executive Director of Heart of the Arts for people that don't know me. And I'd like to introduce Roger Rowley, who is our on Heart of the Arts board and is representing the board today at the table. And we are hopeful that the city would be amenable to this lease agreement as it stands, and we are open to further discussion.
Okay. I have a question probably maybe for Gary or Dwight. Are there other cities that have such a situation with a community center that they have a separate nonprofit running it that you know of?
I'm not aware of any, but that I have not researched it at all. None of my, at least nobody I know of has the same situation.
Same answer.
Okay.
I thought when we set this up 5 years ago that Seattle
Are you using an example of something?
Yes, maybe not identical. Wasn't there a Seattle operation that had an arrangement with a school district to run a building? Gary?
Yeah, we did some research. Joanne Reese and I traveled to Seattle, and there were several institutions there, typically old school buildings, that the city would allow a nonprofit to operate. I don't know what the subsidies were or whether it was just,
what the arrangement
look, here's
was,
your
yeah.
building, you fix it up, you run it. I could dig that research up, but I don't believe it was any sort of arrangement like we have, by the book. like we've got.
Right. I was just curious. Just popped into my head.
If I may?
Go ahead.
My memory is it was a you can do this kind of presentation. They had a successful program. I don't remember subsidies or not, but they had taken an old building and turned it into a community building YMCA type operation, talked about their programs.
Yeah, if you recall, we also invited one of their executive directors over.
Came and talked to us?
Yeah, one of their buildings actually had people living in it. It was an arts living studio. One was an old schoolhouse. One was a former school for wayward Catholic girls. That was a very impressive building, but a little bit larger than what we've got here.
Tim, you got any questions or comments?
Dwight, can you estimate, or do you know exactly what the city's been spending on landscaping and snow removal last year?
I do, but I don't have that with me. I don't know off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
We have been pricing it to be prepared for this fall, and we're finding that the quotes that we're getting are about $800 a month from private landscaping companies to maintain and run and mow the lawns and everything. The city was out there this morning doing our lawns, and it's very lovely, but it is something that is an expense to the city right now that Heart of the Arts would be very happy to take on for the next 5-year term.
And does that include snow removal?
Yes, we will take on snow removal as well, but that snow removal will depend on the volume of snow that we get over the course of the winter, obviously.
Sure.
If we spend more of their time in our parking lot over the winter months, then we will be spending more money on that. So you guys can hope that you escape a nice banner year or two of snow, and we'll take care of that snow removal.
Thank you.
Walter, I know you got some burning questions.
I'm not burning questions so much. Just in case anyone in the audience doesn't realize this, I've been the most outspoken critic of the 1912 building since the day somebody had the thought. And that has not really changed. It has been based upon, just to get this out in the open on the table and get it done, based upon the price per square foot to renovate a 30,000 square foot building. It's somewhere well north of $200 a square foot. I know we were gifted $2 million, but we've also put $1.5 million or more. I forget what the exact numbers are, and we have how many more million to go before it's renovated. I have contended that, having done public works projects, that we could have built an identical-looking building for half the dollars, or one twice the size for the same money. It does serve a purpose, but it does not have good parking. The parking agreement that the city made with the 1912 building, not with HAI, but with the 1912 building, was one that I do not believe they would have made with any developer in this community. They virtually stood on top of the building with binoculars and counted every space they could see. The parking is not good. It's adjacent to the high school that has limited parking. Students park a lot. You know, there are problems with the parking. So I have and remain a critic of what we've got there. I was on the task force that looked at what to do with that building about 4 years after its purchase and original renovation.
Years ago.
When we saw that city staff was just spending what I considered to be an inordinate amount of time managing that building and attempting to find additional funds to renovate it. It was a bottomless pit of staff time. And the task force that looked at this came up with the idea of finding a nonprofit willing to take on the management of that building. I think I was maybe the first one that said, what about Heart of the Arts? I remember a gasp in the room that said, no way, no how. And before it was all over, after a year or two of negotiations, they stepped up and have done a remarkable job, not the least of which is due to the board and to Jenny Sheneman. It has been a great operation. Dwight spends a reasonable amount of time overseeing the city's interest per the contract, Gary spends very little time on it now compared to what he used to spend, hardly any. And that's true pretty much for the rest of the staff, if I'm not misspeaking, Gary.
The grants manager is assisted with a CDBG grant.
Grant funds to do the wall in the back, the retaining wall. So we do still put some time into it, but nothing like what we did. And Heart of the Arts has done a great job. I have gotten criticism from constituents, from citizens of Moscow, about the $100,000 a year that the city spends to subsidize that building. I have gotten comments from other renters of space in the community about feeling that they are being undercut by the prices that Heart of the Arts is charging for their rental space. So those, in addition to the ongoing problems of trying to get it finished, still are sticking points with me. I remember standing at that podium complaining to the city council at that time that even after the original renovation, that it still was a boarded up school building. It looked terrible just to drive by it and look at all the boards in the windows and so forth. The good news is that through the Heart of the Arts efforts, one half of that building now has new windows in it. You got
the other half coming if you
and
let
the other half, and the other half coming if they can keep the contract. So none of this has anything to do in criticizing the Heart of the Arts or what they've done. I still have my questions about value for the dollar. We have some data that's been given to us about their rental rates. I don't know how you want to proceed with that, Gary, but they are the lowest price, nonprofit, 4 hour at a time operation that is used in the city. There is one other facility that apparently no one knows about because they are one other that is less than you.
One less than.
But a nonprofit has never rented it, interestingly. They have less parking than you do. That's at the Idaho Commons. The new Slurp and Burp, I have to refer to that because I'll spend all afternoon explaining where Sherman's Event Center is. Sherman Event Center is. It's the old Slurp and Burp that's been remodeled.
It's lovely.
They quote the same hourly rate for nonprofits that Heart of the Arts does. I have not talked to them. My guess is they set their rates after Heart of the Arts. Just a wild guess on my part. So, Gary, I don't know what you want to do to talk about rental rates, if anything.
If I may?
Yep.
Actually, Jen Piffner did a lot of this work. If she would come forward and just run us through the spreadsheet, could help explain where the information came from, and then you can proceed with your discussion.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank Jenny Shenneman. She had a lot of this information. She'd pulled some of it together, and then I just kind of built on it based on council requests, staff requests, and desires for information. What we've done here is take the main event centers in the city of Moscow, including your Eagles, Elks, American Legions, those types of things, based on the premise of somebody calling and looking for a space for a wedding. We tried to keep the ballpark of the seated area or dance area, the allowable limit of people in the room, between 100 and 200. Some go over, but just within that range. So kind of to compare an apples to apples, or provide an apples to apples comparison. From there, we just went, if you want to go from left to right with me, looked at the cost. Some were cost per hour, cost per day, things like that. So when the information was requested from the individual organizations, this came straight from the organization, there was no inference made. We calculated that based on the hourly or the daily fee to come up with the final 3 columns on the far right for the full day. If you're having a wedding, 10 hours, set up, clean up, the whole 9 yards. A 4-hour meeting rental for just any business entity or group. And then if you were a nonprofit group looking for a space to meet for 4 hours. So back to rate, then we have a kitchen column if there's a kitchen available, whether it's there's a fee that a person would have to pay to use that space as well. Catering restrictions, tables and chairs either available, linens available, wait staff available. AV is audio visual, PowerPoint projector screen arrangements. Included a column for liquor license if the entity has one, and then whether or not they would set up tables and chairs, arrangements for the room if there was a fee or if they would do that free of charge. I believe everybody either did it or they didn't. There wasn't a fee for that column. And then again, those rental rates estimated out in 3 different ways.
The only thing I might add to this is that not all of this reflects whether or not you're required to use a specific caterer on site. There are certain event places that have a caterer that's tied into that event place, and then there are those spaces that you can bring your own food or provide your own outside caterer or have a mixture of multiple.
And those would be noted by the no restriction, and then the on-site only caterers are listed in there. And then along the bottom, you have very large spaces that we included, and that's 400 plus. Schweitzer Event Center is also another one, not in our area, but it would fall into that category as well for 500 people or more.